Fighting last night in Lashkar Gah, filmed by a former Afghan interpreter for the British Army, whose identity we're disguising.
We are so scared. We know that the city is almost 95% fall to the Taliban hands, and I know that whenever they are relaxed, they will be searching the houses, finding the people who work for the British forces and for the NATO and for the ISAF. So I strongly request the UK government to help and save the lives of those who work for the British forces. You know, the firing right now, it's very near to me. It's around like half kilometer or 1 kilometer near to me. So this is very risky when I'm just recording here.
Having been suspended on what he says was a minor disciplinary charge, he doesn't qualify for asylum in the UK. That may make sense to bureaucrats in London, but to the Taliban, he's guilty by association anyway. Scarcely what the British hoped for when they handed over their Lashkar Gah headquarters to the Afghan National Army a decade ago. Now that Western countries led by the Americans have entirely abandoned Afghanistan, Afghan forces are crumbling as the Taliban advance. Today, the Afghan president told parliamentarians in Kabul that he had a 6-month plan to re-establish peace. But fighting talk is no good if you're losing the fighting on the ground. He blamed the US for their precipitate military withdrawal.
The situation which we're facing is due to their sudden decision to withdraw. I told the American president that I respect your decision because it was his decision, but I knew that it would have consequences and Afghans would have to manage the crisis.
Since April, the Taliban, shown in red, have taken mainly rural areas across the country. Now they're closing in on 3 provincial capitals, Herat, Lashkar Gah and Kandahar. Contested areas shown in orange are shrinking, while the government controls other towns including Kabul and surrounding areas. Taliban supporters last month after their fighters took Spin Boldak, a major border crossing with Pakistan. Pakistani intelligence services have long supported the Taliban, which is unlikely to seize power in Kabul without Pakistani approval. A Taliban delegation recently met Chinese officials in the port city of Tianjin. The Chinese have economic interests in Afghanistan, which they hope to advance as the US pulls back.
The regional powers, apart from those who had long-standing relations with the Taliban, even the others are all trying to see, whether they can build up a relationship, whether they can improve the relationship. So basically, more and more the Taliban are being seen as a winning horse in this race, and therefore there is a race to, please them and accommodate them.
Today, Uzbek, Tajik and Russian forces prepared for military exercises on Tajikistan's border with Afghanistan, fearing instability will spill over. Western powers have left a void, into which other powers will now step, whether Afghans like it or not.
Well, joining me now is Naveed Nurmal, who's a former Afghan diplomat and commentator, and the Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood, who chairs the House of Commons Defence Select Committee. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Naveed Nurmal, the Taliban are fast gaining ground. How are they doing it?
Well, the military advancement of the Taliban in different provinces of Afghanistan is definitely alarming for multiple reasons, including a leverage that it gives them at the table, at the negotiation table. The increase in the level of violence by the Taliban and the high casualties at the ground is concerning. With regard to your question of how they do in it, that's exactly. I would want to say here that Taliban cannot really pursue such an advancement in the ground unless they have support from an external sponsor. Which at this point of time, all the evidences are indicating that they receive their support from Pakistan, where they have the safe havens and also the training centers.
Okay. Tobias Ellwood, the US and Britain spent decades dedicated to this military intervention in Afghanistan, and this is the result today. What went wrong?
Well, where do you start? I mean, there are so many errors that were made by the West. Let's not forget that this was a very, very difficult task to take on, the corruption that you have in the country, the history itself. But nevertheless, there were some schoolboy errors. It took 5 years for us even to start thinking about training Afghan forces so they could take on their own security. In 2001, Donald Rumsfeld denied the Taliban a seat at the table back in Bonn. Imagine how different things could have worked out had they been included in those talks. And we failed to learn the simple basic lesson that you cannot defeat an insurgency by military means alone. There needs to be some capability to promote governance, rule of law, and build the economy. And every time I visited Afghanistan, more than a dozen times, everything was focused on the military alone. And now we see the country spiraling towards civil war. And the West, I think, needs to hang its head in shame as to what we've done in giving up after 2 decades, breaking our promises to the Afghan people. We're now ceding it to the very insurgency that we went in to defeat. And we're now going to give a haven to more terrorist groups. And we're going to see a flood of migrants come from Afghanistan. This has gone horribly wrong for the West. And I'm even saddened as well that America and Britain will not have a review to learn the lessons so we don't repeat them in the future.
And I know you would particularly like to see an inquiry here in Britain, but what should Britain's role be now in Afghanistan? What should we be doing?
Well, it isn't just Britain. The West should have a better understanding as to what they want to do as a strategy. Essentially, they got bored with what was going on. They decided that this was no longer a good war, as Obama called it. It was a forever war. Well, it was a forever war because we made basic mistakes and we didn't advance the country in a structural way that we should have done. Where we are right now, and you touched on Afghanistan and the interpreters, there is an immediacy here because of the speed in which the Taliban are taking over, for us to urgently look at those interpreters and other supporters and get them out of the country and review the situation just like the United States would do. I hope Britain will now consider that.
Naveed Nourmat, the Afghan president, has said that all of this can be fixed in 6 months. Is that realistic?
Looking at what's happening at the ground, it's really important to see that what are the scenarios that could be ensued. I would like to say here that the realities on the ground are definitely very concerning. The casualties that we are having, the advancement by the Taliban on the ground, are some of the indications that probably are not showing any hopes to the people of Afghanistan. But it really depends on how the stakeholders are going to unfold their role about Afghanistan. At the national level today, we had the Emergency National Assembly that unanimously supported the Afghan National Security Forces, the peace process, and also the Republic. Something which was very due long time ago, although late, but was finally declared by the government and was basically.
But at some point, this is going to. But at some point, this is going to involve negotiations with the Taliban again, isn't it?
The government, definitely, the government of Afghanistan is ready for the peace negotiations. Something that is basically maybe taking the Taliban, or maybe the Taliban are thinking that they are able to win this war militarily, a myth that they think will give them more legitimacy at the government, at the table, is probably something that is avoiding or maybe making the peace process slower. But at the end of the day, if we know for a fact, the international community knows and the world knows that this war is not going to be won militarily, the only way to solve this is through political agreement. But unfortunately, the reality on the ground shows something else. Taliban have, after the withdrawal of the US or the announcement, they have increased the violence, maybe with a theory that they will be pushing.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you. I just want to bring in Tobias Ellwood. Just lastly, we're running out of time. Mr. Ellwood, we know that China is talking to the Taliban. We heard about Russian troops on the border with Tajikistan. Which of these regional powers do you fear most in Afghanistan?
Well, this is the irony of this. The real estate that we're talking about here, as geopolitics shifts from the West to the east. What a shame that we didn't invest in Afghanistan in the same way that we invested in Germany after the Second World War. Just imagine if we'd abandoned Germany right after we'd won and left it to its own devices. Where would the Iron Curtain have ended up? And that's exactly what we've done here. We've lacked the appetite and the decisions to stay the longevity here. And we've now allowed China and indeed Russia to fill that vacuum indeed. And China, don't forget, follows a very different agenda.
We're running out of time. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are going to have to leave it there. Tobias Ellwood, Naveed Nurmal, thank you very much for joining us.